Welcome to this video on the Nokta Invenio Pro, a 3D imaging detector from Nokta, a Turkish company. You may be familiar with their sister company who they have since merged with, Macro, who made the Racer and several other detectors. I'd like to start by showing you the box. That might seem a strange choice, but bear with me. This is the box. It weighs a ton, it is heavily padded, it's waterproof, and it's clearly designed to go in the back of a Land Rover and be knocked around. The detector, when stored here, is obviously dismantled, and it comes with space for two of the coils. One is the small coil, which is about the size of a conventional double D coil. The middle-sized coil goes on top here and is on the detector, and I'll show you that in a moment. And then we have the big coil. The big coil is frankly huge. It is surprisingly light. It doesn't have a coil cover, which you would kind of expect for the price, but never mind. And it is frankly absurdly large. It's the largest I've ever seen on any detector. If you buy the Pro package, you'll also get a second battery for the control unit. Now you might be thinking that's pretty chunky for battery. And it is, but when you see the control unit, I promise it will make sense. Oh, the second battery, which you only get with the Pro, is high capacity, so I'd recommend using that one as your default battery. Right, we should probably take a look at the detector itself now. So, this is the medium coil. There's a human foot by comparison. I take size 11s, it's a big coil. The next feature I'd like to point out is this bit. This is a 3D imaging camera, and I think it also has some sort of gyroscopic sensor in there. It actually tracks the swing, and will show you on screen where you've passed the detector head over, so you can be sure not to miss anything. You'll notice there are two markings, one red, one blue. The red is for the small coil and the medium coil, while the blue is for the very large coil. And let's look at the underside of that a moment. You can see that we have a camera set up in there. The control stem is relatively simple, and if you're thinking there's no display, you're right, there is no display on the control stem. The buttons are switch between scan mode and detect mode, OK, back and clear, which are things you often use, and there is a trigger under there, which is used for ground balancing and pinpointing. At the top end we have the battery, forgive the dolls, the grandchildren have been around, and the power switch. Now there is a cover that comes with this, and I would strongly recommend putting it on. The reason being that several times in the field those clips have come off and the battery has fallen onto the soil, which is unhelpful. Here we have the control unit. You may be thinking that it looks like a small chunky laptop, and you'd be right. It is actually a small Linux system. Let's boot it up. This isn't exactly a turn on and go detector. It appears to have entirely solid state hardware. They haven't published the specs, but I suspect it's an Intel or an AMD processor running a Linux variant with a custom shell and some custom hardware in there. You'll see it has a speaker. It also has a socket for a headphone, or it can use wireless headphones. You require Nokta green headphones for this. So it says Wi-Fi failed. That's because it is currently unable to link with the control stem. You'll notice that the Wi-Fi icon here is red, indicating the control stem is not responding because it's turned off. Sound is on, vibration is off. The battery on this unit is full. If it could talk to the other unit, it would show you the battery level in that, because it has a separate battery. And these are the controls that you can use. So these navigation buttons, zoom in, zoom out, scan or clear. Now this is a multi-frequency detector, but not perhaps in the way you might imagine. Go into options a second. You'll see that frequency can be 5 kHz, 14 or 20. Now many high-end detectors can use multiple frequencies at the same time. This one can't. Is that a disadvantage? Not really. The point of multiple frequencies is to give you more information, and trust me, this gives you more information. If you're getting interference, you can shift the frequency up or down a little bit. The IPTU sensor, that's the camera gizmo I showed you that gives you a 3D position. Now that is used for mapping of objects and telling you where the coil has swung. The rest of the settings are all fairly obvious. When I got this, it was using an older version of the firmware. I've updated the firmware to the latest. When I was using the previous firmware, there were times when it was a touch laggy, but it is pretty responsive. One thing I should say is the unit is heavy, very heavy. If you get the Pro, it comes with a harness that is not great shakes. I did not like it. It broke the first day I used it. Mode of operation. Let's get out of that. We're back and go into settings. Right, so there are 6 modes. Basic and Expert are non-motion modes. That's to say that it will still detect when the coil is stationary. Now it's unusual to have detectors that do both. I've not seen any before. This one can. The Basic and Expert are basically the same thing. You just get more options in the Expert, but it's somewhat more complicated to use. Ground anomaly and cavity will still detect metal, but it's primarily designed to tell you about disturbed earth, cavities in the earth. Cavities are shown as a blue depression, like a pool of water, which makes sense. All motion mode metal is pretty much like every other all metal mode you've ever seen. Fast is not dissimilar to the Racer or the Impact's 3-tone. And deep is a very sensitive and kind of chattery mode. If you do air tests in deep mode, you'll get odd results because it does not cope well with a lack of soil. In the soil, it works a lot better. One thing I've noticed, which is not mentioned anywhere in the manual, is that the Basic and Expert modes seem to be pretty much immune to electromagnetic interference. I was detecting under power lines, and in discrimination mode, and indeed the discrimination mode of every other detector present, was going absolutely nuts. Switch to Basic, quiet as could be, not a problem at all, worked perfectly well. In addition to these modes, you have scan mode, but scan mode is separate. What you do for scan mode is, once you've detected a target and you know roughly where it is and roughly what sort of size it is, you press a scan button, you go over the terrain again, making sure to cover the edges, and then when you've done that, you press OK. And what happens then is that the artificial intelligence attempts to figure out what the shape of the object is. Now, when I say artificial intelligence, it's not the type we may be familiar with, where there's a set of rules and it tries to apply them to give you a better result. It's actually a neural network. It works like a biological system. So you actually train it as you go. This is untrained because I've just updated the firmware, so the neural network is blank. But with use, it will get better if you give it feedback on which of the interpretations it gave you is the most accurate. It comes with a manual, but one thing that can be helpful is that there is a built-in manual, but it's not easy to find. You go to Options, the buttons are chunky, they are designed to be used in gloves. You press OK. 3D files are saved files of 3D plots of images, of objects, 3D plots of objects. Screenshots is just what it says. You can take a screenshot at any point for reference. And if you go down to tutorial videos, you will find that there are videos. They are all voiced by a computer-generated voice, and they were translated from Turkish, I believe. And the quality is not wonderful, but you do have them in the field right there on your detector. So here is the advice on calibrating the sensor, for example.
IPTU sensor calibration. Correct usage of the IPTU sensor is critical in terms of the device's performance. The sensor.
And that's enough of that. As you can see from the chap using it, it's a big detector. After using it for a day, it felt like my arm was going to fall off. The standard battery for the control unit lasts about 4 hours. The bigger battery lasts 5 to 6 hours. So with the 2 battery setup, you've got a lot of options. The smaller battery in the stem lasts 8 to 9 hours, which is probably enough for most detecting jobs. It can be used as a beats detector. It would be a very strange choice to do so because you're coin shooting with a $10,000 detector, and you're not going to get a return on investment anytime soon that way. Where this comes into its own is for horde hunting and for deep detection. So for very large objects, it can certainly detect them at many feet. So for example, I didn't have a horde handy, sadly, so I checked on a farm gate, and I was able to pick that up at 5 feet, which is impressive. I don't know of any other detector that would do that. You pay for it in terms of the actual cost of the unit and in terms of the weight. I have to emphasize this is a heavy detector. You're going to want a harness, not really the one that came with, and a bungee to support the detector while you're working, and you will need the arm strap because otherwise it will get heavy. On the plus side, the arm cup is adjustable and it can be made easier to use, and you can use wireless headphones, but there's not a lot of point, frankly, because this unit stays strapped to you. There's a strap that goes onto the mounting plate. I've taken off the mounting plate and the covers for the demonstration, and there's a belt plate that goes under there, and it attaches to your belt and to the neck strap. So taking it off is a bit of a palaver. You're probably best off just closing it up and digging, or better yet, if you have a friend who's willing to help, it works very well as a 2-man detector, simply because of the size and weight of the thing. One thing I did not initially realize is that this screw here actually adjusts the tension of the lid. And so when I was using it in the field at first, it was forever closing up on me, which I did not want it to do. So you can adjust that there. I will make another video which shows me actually using it in the field. It has been pretty accurate when it comes to detecting the size and shape of things. I have been surprised by that. It has been less good at telling the difference between deep iron and a good target, and the discrimination settings are not set the way you would probably want for a British field. That said, it's an excellent piece of kit. It feels a little bit like a prototype. Nokta have said that they plan to bring the technology used here into hobby detectors, but given the size and weight of this thing and the cost, I would suspect it's going to be a while. Anyway, that was a quick overview of the Nokta Invenio Pro, and I hope it was of interest.